Lent begins in 59, 60 minutes. Mardi Gras is officially over. Did Shannon Bream catch those? Come on, Shannon, you got to catch the beads.
I did. I nailed
That's
it.
the whole thing.
I nailed it. And 1 hour from now, we really start behaving. So we're going to pay attention, Laura.
Have a great show.
Thank you so much. Here is what we have coming up tonight. Who knew what and when about the domestic abuse allegations against a top presidential aide? The FBI calls into question the White House timeline on Rob Porter.
We administratively closed the file in January.
The FBI portion was closed. The White House Personnel Security Office had not finished their process.
Tonight, we separate fact from fiction and
the president's framework bill is not an opening bid for negotiations. It's a best and final offer.
It's down to the wire for lawmakers to find a permanent solution for nearly 2 million young illegal immigrants. The Senate Majority Leader says this is the week to solve DACA. Plus,
we need to inform the American public that this is real.
The country's top intelligence officials say Russia is already meddling in the 2018 elections. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. A troubling timeline and prospects of a promotion keep the focus in and outside of the White House on the resignation of Staff Secretary Rob Porter and the future of Chief of Staff General John Kelly. The FBI director testifying today, the agency repeatedly updated the administration on its investigation into domestic abuse allegations involving Porter last year, while the White House continues to insist the worst of the revelations were only recently uncovered. There are also questions about whether Porter's security clearance procedure was finished or still ongoing. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us live now with this controversy the White House has been unable to shake now for days, Ed.
That's right, Shannon. The Wall Street Journal reported that in an interview yesterday, John Kelly said when it came to the Rob Porter story, it was, quote, all done right. A claim that even some of the president's supporters do not necessarily believe, especially since today Fox News confirmed, as you noted, that right before his abrupt departure over domestic abuse allegations, Porter was being considered for a promotion, possibly even as Deputy Chief of Staff to Kelly. Yes, under consideration for a promotion, even though FBI Director Christopher Wray today testified that his agency delivered the background investigation on Porter in January. Testimony that seemed to contradict the White House's claim yesterday that the FBI clearance process did not reveal the allegations against Porter in a timely fashion. So Sarah Sanders shifted the White House timeline today, admitting the FBI did give information on Porter to the White House Personnel Security Office. Watch.
We did the follow-up and provided that information in November, and that we administratively closed the file in January. And then earlier this month, we received some additional information, and we passed that on as well.
The White House Personnel Security Office, staffed by career officials, received information last year and what they considered to be the final background investigation report in November.
Now, the one-time White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci tweeted, quote, based on FBI testimony, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly almost certainly knew about credible allegations of domestic abuse against Porter at least 6 months ago, then recently forced others to lie about that timeline. Inexcusable. Kelly must resign. Now, various Trump allies told him to butt out, suggesting maybe Scaramucci was still sore at Kelly, pushing him out of his job. So Scaramucci tweeted, quote, domestic abuse is a red line. Covering up for it is indefensible. If speaking out against that makes me look petty, then so be it. This has nothing to do with my exit from the White House. I trust the FBI director in this matter, and so should you. We'll know the full truth soon enough. Now, tonight, a top White House official told Fox that Kelly's position is still, quote, rock solid, though the speculation is still swirling about whether he may be out soon, Shannon.
All right. And tonight we're also hearing about something else, learning that the president's lawyer says he actually did pay a porn star who was rumored to have had an affair with the president. The lawyer says out of his own pocket, this had nothing to do with the campaign. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Michael Cohen, I just got off the phone with him, known him a long time, lawyer for President Trump, tells Fox that this New York Times scoop is true. He paid $130,000 out of his own pocket to Stephanie Clifford. You know her as Stormy Daniels. He's admitting this to push back on a charge that either the Trump campaign or the Trump organization paid her and that it was somehow improper. In fact, he's saying the payment was lawful. This might raise more questions about possible hush money, since the president and the porn star have insisted nothing happened. So why pay her? Well, Cohen just told me in a phone call, Even if something is untrue, it can be damaging. His goal all along was to protect the president, Shannon.
All right, Ed, thank you for the last-minute update. We appreciate it. All right, a federal court is set to make public documents from former independent counsel Ken Starr's probe of then-President Bill Clinton that eventually led to his impeachment. The order follows a request by CNN suggesting that the documents could give insight on how special counsel Robert Mueller is conducting the current Russia probe and how he could handle possible testimony from President Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls it a witch hunt and vows to remain in office after Israeli police said there is enough evidence to indict him for corruption and bribery. Correspondent Connor Powell is following the story, joins us now from Jerusalem with details of the case where it is an early morning there. Good morning, Connor.
Yeah, good morning, Shannon. Well, these investigations have been going on for about a year or so. And for the most part, this investigation into Prime Minister Netanyahu, they've sort of remained in the background politically. That's all changed now. Just a few hours ago, the Israeli police issued a recommendation to the Attorney General's office that Prime Minister Netanyahu should be charged in 2 separate corruption cases. Now, in the first case, Netanyahu was caught on tape, offering help to an Israeli newspaper publisher in return for favorable coverage. In another case, Netanyahu is accused of accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts from several different businessmen. The prime minister doesn't deny accepting champagne, jewelry, and cigars, but insists they were just gifts from friends and not bribes. Now, Netanyahu was defiant earlier today during a televised speech where he denied all of the allegations.
All these attempts, without exception, will end with nothing, because I know the truth. I tell you this time, too. Things will end with nothing.
Now, just because the Israeli police have made this recommendation to the Attorney General's office doesn't mean, in fact, the Attorney General will indict the Prime Minister. He still has to review this, and it should be pointed out, Shannon, that the Attorney General here in Israel is a close, key ally of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
All right, Connor, where does this leave Netanyahu's overall government then?
Well, it was just a couple of years ago that a similar Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert's government was brought down with accusations of corruption. His coalition partner simply bailed on him. That doesn't look like it's going to happen here yet, but there are several members of the coalition, the conservative coalition here, that support Prime Minister Netanyahu, who are itching to be Prime Minister themselves. So that's what we're waiting to see, if these corruption charges are brought forward, whether or not his coalition partners hang with him going forward. Shannon.
All right, Connor Powell, live for us in Jerusalem. Thank you. The fight to get something done on immigration reform is getting dicey, as one senator says it is the president's way or no way at all, while yet another federal judge throws a wrench into the president's plans to roll back DACA within weeks. Correspondent Leland Vitter tells us where things stand on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Leland.
And Shannon, good evening to you. Welcome to Senate DACA debate day 2. And we effectively start at the same place we did yesterday. Both sides agreeing to agree, which should give us a deal, or at least hope of a deal. Just listen to the Senate majority and minority leaders.
I think the sooner the better. And if we can come up with a bipartisan compromise that looks like it's right in the ballpark of 60, let it rip. Let's go.
There's no reason in the world why, if there is a core 60 votes to support something, we can't achieve it in the next few days.
In front of a bipartisan congressional group, President Trump seemed optimistic about a deal that would grant either citizenship or legal status to 1.8 million people brought here illegally as kids, a.k.a. Dreamers.
I hope we can do DACA. That's currently up. Everybody's in there working hard on it right now. I think we have a chance to do DACA very bipartisan. I think that can happen.
And right there is where the agreement ends and bipartisanship takes a decidedly partisan turn. Now listen to the president laying out his terms and one of his closest allies effectively ending any chance of negotiation.
We want securing the border and a wall, ending chain migration, and canceling the visa lottery.
The president's framework bill is not an opening bid for negotiations. It's a best and final offer. The White House took ideas from a lot of different proposals that have floated around for 5.5 months, and it put those into a coherent, logical package.
On the Senate floor, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer also squashed any bipartisan spirit.
To begin this debate, as the Republican leader suggests, would be getting off on the wrong foot. unrelated to DACA, very partisan. Respectfully, I suggest we move to the bills offered by Senators Grassley and Senator Coons instead. Let's get this debate started on the right foot. So I object to the leader's request.
Republicans point to statements like that as proof Democrats would rather use the so-called Dreamers as a campaign issue for the 2018 midterms than actually make a deal. Conceivably, a deal comes with a March 5th deadline. But breaking late today, Shannon, another federal judge issued a preliminary injunction effectively stopping President Trump's wind down of DACA protections. Conceivably, that gives the Senate a perfect opportunity to kick the can down the road. If we have learned anything about this Congress, it's that when offered the opportunity to punt, Shannon, true bipartisan agreement is very easy to find.
That's true. Well, at least it's an agreement on something, right?
Something.
We'll see where they go from here. Leland Vitter, thank you very much. Today, another letter containing suspicious powder arrived at the former President Barack Obama's D.C. office building. The substance, discovered to be baby powder, was not addressed to the former president. It follows yesterday's white powder scare that sent President Trump's daughter-in-law to the hospital. And Fox News has learned there's been an increase in suspicious substances addressed to members of the House and Senate over the past 2 weeks. So far, all tests have come back negative. Well, he's not even running, but word that Tennessee Senator Bob Corker is rethinking his retirement already has one campaign ramping up the rhetoric. The spokeswoman for Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn's Senate campaign says anyone who doubts she can win in November is a, quote, sexist pig, and added they aren't worried about, quote, ego-driven, tired old men. Corker announced his retirement back in September, but some Republicans claim internal state polls show Blackburn could potentially lose the seat to former Democratic Governor Phil Bresden. Well, first Corker, and now a North Dakota congressman, is also feeling the heat to reconsider a Senate run. Republican Congressman Kevin Cramer initially decided not to run against freshman Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp. She's thought to be one of the most vulnerable senators this cycle. Well, Cramer now tells Fox News he'll make a decision by the end of this weekend. A left-leaning public policy group wants to restrict overseas members of the military from voting, citing cybersecurity concerns. The Center for American Progress issued a report this week recommended banning troops stationed abroad from submitting ballots via email or fax. But Colorado's Secretary of State defended the practice, saying that state has incorporated enough safeguards and believes someone who, for example, works on a submarine should be allowed to vote. Well, President Trump's approval has plenty of room for improvement, but he's entering the second year of his term on an upswing. At the same time, Democrats are hoping to pick up seats and flip the House in the 2018 midterms.
You cannot just run against Donald Trump. And it is the job of we Democrats to put together a strong, cohesive economic group of proposals aimed at the middle class and those struggling to get there.
Let's talk with Fox News politics editor and editor of Halftime Report, Chris Steyerwalt, about the current political lay of the land. Good to see you tonight.
That's kind of my jam.
It is definitely your jam. Jam on it. And we have a few months to go, and the world can change between now and then.
So much.
What do you make of what we're seeing right now?
Well, you want to know how much the world can change? The world can change so much that compared to a month ago, the president's approval rating is up substantially. We've got him in our Halftime Report average hovering right around the 40% mark, which is substantially better than it was at the end of last year. A lot of that has to do with taxes. Also, the generic ballot has gotten tighter. And now we're hearing Democrats warning, hey, guys, don't take this for granted. You're going to have to hustle for this.
Yeah, you can't, as Schumer was just saying there, you can't just run against him. We got to have our own plans. Priorities USA, which is a Democratic super PAC, had this to say: while still on track for a successful November, the extent of Democratic gains will be blunted if Democrats do not re-engage more aggressively in speaking to the economic and health care priorities of voters. Democrats continue to have winning messages on health care and the economy, but right now voters are not hearing them, and that must change if Democrats are going to win.
And that's a true fact. Now, here's the thing for Republicans, though. Just as the climate has changed substantially in the last 6 weeks in their favor, what will the next 6 weeks bring? What will the next 6 weeks bring? I can't tell you the potential harm we're right now tracking very closely. 1 month from today, we're going to have a special election in Pennsylvania. And a lot of that's going to depend on how women in the suburbs of Pittsburgh are going to vote. Which way are they going to go on this? Do you think that this ongoing stuff about the domestic violence accusations against a senior White House staffer and the mishandling of that, you think that helps or do you think that hurts? You think that if they can get to a deal on DACA or if they can't get to a deal on DACA and all of a sudden the Republicans say, yes, we're going to start deporting these people, do you think that helps or that hurts? It hurts. So what you do, and this should be the lesson for Republicans, what you do and how you act has a material effect on how voters perceive you. These things aren't all baked into the cake, and you can crumble to mix our metaphors, you could crumble your cookie now.
Yes, you could. I love cookies. Okay, chocolate chip are my favorite.
True.
Tweet us and let us know. What is your favorite?
Don't
steal oatmeal raisin.
I'm a snickerdoodle person, probably mostly, but I'll go with the Magic Cookie Bar as number one.
Okay, but what if you put chocolate chips in a snickerdoodle?
That's gross.
I feel like that's unbeatable.
Gross. That's gross.
Okay, well, tweet us and let us know what you think. In the meantime, let's break down both the things you brought up. Jonathan Swan in Axios says this today, talking about the back and forth that the White House is having to do about when they knew and what they knew. He says Wray, meaning the FBI directors, Wray's FBI timeline makes one thing clear. The Kelly cover-up is unraveling right before our eyes. A White House official says.
A White House official who wants John Kelly.
A
White House official who wants John Kelly to get fired says, here's the thing. The president has to balance here. There were multiple layered failures on this. And by the way, one of the failures was the president in praising the object of this investigation, even after it was clear that he had to leave because of these accusations.
And the White House has now said multiple times, we got this wrong. We got this wrong. We would do better next time. We're working on our internal review process.
So is John Kelly, who is the president's point man on the Hill and who has succeeded in bringing order to a chaotic White House. I loved Anthony Scaramucci talking about a lack of order in the White House almost as much as I did about Corey Lewandowski.
He might be an expert on lack of order in the White House.
That's true. The Tasmanian devil knows the tornado. But look, the president has to decide, is Kelly worth it? And if you fire Kelly and you push him out over this, is what comes next worth it? And a lot of that will depend on whom could you replace him, and is that person palatable, and can they handle the job?
Yeah, we don't have time right now, but some of the names have come out. You and I have talked about, I don't think that would be a fit.
Wowzers.
Don't mention any of those names.
Wowzers.
But anyway, great to see you. We'll continue cookie discussion next time you're back.
And a happy Shrove Tuesday to you.
And you as well. Behave yourself. Lent's coming. All right, top intelligence officials have no doubt Russia will be a problem again during the 2018 elections. In fact, they say our foreign frenemy is already meddling. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton joins us next to weigh in on the threat. Plus, a food delivery program to replace food stamps. The White House is floating an option, a look at whether it's actually viable and why some people are offended. Just ahead.
Frankly, the United States is under attack by entities that are using cyber to penetrate virtually every major action that takes place in the United States. There should be no doubt that Russia perceived that its past efforts as successful and views the 2018 U.S. midterm elections as a potential target for Russian influence operations.
That was Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats at a Senate hearing today, addressing worldwide threats. Some Democrats claim while the intelligence community is taking the threat of Russian election meddling seriously, the president is not. Joining me now to discuss that and more, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, great to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
So let's start there with this Russia threat, because we heard discussions today that they've already started meddling in what is coming down the pike, these 2018 elections.
Sure, I don't doubt it. And look, this fits a pattern that the Russians have followed. The Soviets followed it before them. Of trying to interfere in the American political system, in the election or elsewhere, through spreading desinformatia, disinformation. I wouldn't get hung up on the fact they're using digital communications and cyber warfare and whatnot. That's just the latest technology. The effort is to sow distrust about American institutions. And if you look at our past year's debate over Russia collusion, the role of the FBI, they're doing a pretty good job.
What do you make of this threat? I mean, does it come to us through other means, through social media? There's been so much about what they did or didn't do on Facebook and on Twitter and the bots and that kind of thing. But so many people are engaged and actually report, especially younger generation, they get their news through social media. And if that's where the misinformation is being spread, it seems like a perfect opportunity for them.
Well, it's hard to see really any direct connection between the use of social media. They did in Britain an investigation of the effect on the Brexit referendum and found essentially there was no effect. Don't think the Russians are so much more sophisticated on social media than we are. But the notion of spreading false information, of getting people to turn on one another, to undermine faith in law enforcement and intelligence institutions, that all plays right into Russia's hands. And this is a form of propaganda that they're engaged in, and they've been doing it for a long time. We've got substantial indications they've been doing it in multiple European elections. So I would expect that they're going to continue it, and we need to be ready for it. We need to have an open debate on it because the more we expose it, the harder it is for them to have an influence.
And it seems like there are plenty of folks on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle who openly stress that this is happening and they want the American people to understand regardless of party, and it's not a partisan issue. Of course, no discussion of worldwide threats would be complete without talking about North Korea. Director Coates also touched on that threat today.
Well, this is an existential threat, potentially to the United States, but also to North Korea. Kim Jong-un views this as any kind of kinetic attack or effort to force him to give up his nuclear weapons is an existential threat to his nation and to his leadership in particular.
So let's talk about what they did with the Olympics. Aside from all the fawning, gushing media situation, there were some breakthroughs, it seemed like, with South Korea. So, you know, some cracks in the door there, between those two at least.
Well, I think the present government of South Korea, following in the path of prior South Korean governments, is open to this kind of persuasion. I think they have a very misguided view of what's going on in North Korea. But a lot of this happened in the 2000 Olympics, in the 2004 Olympics, in the 2006 Olympics. Didn't slow North Korea's nuclear weapons program down at all. This, too, is a form of propaganda. I think what Senator Coates was saying there, though, about North Korea posing an existential threat is important. And I take what he says when he says existential, he means our existence. The fact of North Korean nuclear weapons could end the existence of American cities. I find that intolerable. And I think that those who say we can live with a nuclear North Korea badly misunderstand the nature of the regime and the threat of a truly multipolar nuclear world, which is why the Trump administration has got to make some very hard decisions about the possible use of military force. We cannot blink this reality any longer.
And is our military prepared that, to your best guesstimate for the president, all of those options?
Well, I think they are preparing, and I don't think anybody should doubt our capability. I remember Colin Powell, when he was Secretary of State, used to tell me, when I worked for him at the time, that after he left being chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the 90s, he was out on the lecture circuit, he was sometimes asked, what would we do if North Korea ever used chemical weapons against South Korea? And Secretary Powell's answer was, we will turn North Korea into a charcoal briquette. So our capability should not be underestimated. A question in the past has been what our resolve is.
That is a good question. All right, Ambassador, always good to have you.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming in. All right, the president proposes a major makeover to the federal food stamp program in his new budget. Coming up, Trace Gallagher reports on why the plan is raising a lot of eyebrows. And anonymity at what cost? Lottery winner Jane Doe gets her day in court in New Hampshire and gets one step closer to collecting $500 million in winnings. But will she have to step into the spotlight to get it? With the touch of a few buttons or an app, Americans can pay a premium to have fresh food delivered straight to their homes. The Trump administration wants to use that model for a new program it's proposing to replace food stamps. Trace Gallagher is here to explain why many people think the comparison is in bad taste. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. For the past 40 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has distributed food stamps either through paper coupons or electronic transfer cards, like debit cards. That way, recipients could get the food of their choice at the store of their choice. Under the new proposal, any family that gets more than $90 a month in benefits, which is about 80% of all food stamp households, would now have some of their benefits delivered as non-perishable food items. We're talking about juice, grains, cereal, pasta, peanut butter, along with fruits and vegetables and canned meats. The USDA has officially dubbed the program America's Harvest Box, but Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney has likened it to Blue Apron, you know, the company that delivers uncooked meals. Here he is. Watch.
It lowers the cost to us because we can buy prices at wholesale whereas they have to buy it at retail. It also makes sure that they're getting nutritious food.
The program would save the federal government an estimated $129 billion over 10 years. But the Trump administration is getting big-time pushback. One, for using the Blue Apron analogy, because critics say Blue Apron meals run about $10 a piece, while food stamp meals average $1.37. An op-ed in the left-leaning LA Times calls the idea mean and dumb, saying conservatives have always harbored a special hostility for the food stamp program. Some Democratic lawmakers are also furious. Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern says the program sounds like something out of the Great Depression, not 2018. Others say the current program is working just fine and people should be allowed to choose their own food. It is worth noting that since 1968, the U.S. population has gone up 68%. The food stamp program has gone up 1,400%. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. Well, President Trump's border wall is getting closer to reality this week. Companies are putting in bids now to construct a barrier along a 3-mile section at the South Texas border. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says a contract will be awarded in May, but only, of course, if Congress can reach a deal to actually fund it. Well, the illegal immigrant who was acquitted of murdering Kate Steinle after his defense team admitted he shot her was back in a San Francisco courtroom today. Jose Inez Garcia Zarate pleaded not guilty to federal gun charges. Garcia Zarate's attorneys argue that the charges are politically motivated, and they say the case should be thrown out. The so-called Chelsea bomber was sentenced to life in prison today. 30 people were hurt when Ahmad Rahimi set off a pressure cooker bomb in a crowded New York City neighborhood in 2016. Rahimi had also planted other bombs in New York and New Jersey that failed to explode. Well, the lottery winner who wants to remain anonymous might be able to go ahead and collect her $560 million jackpot, even as a judge decides whether or not to let her do it without revealing her name. Our legal eagles debated her case yesterday here in Night Court. I heard all about it from you on Twitter. What you think? Well, tonight, correspondent Molly Line with an update on what happened today in a New Hampshire courtroom.
This ticket is the most valuable piece of paper on the planet Earth.
She purchased her ticket at a Merrimack convenience store, but beyond that, we do not know much about the New Hampshire woman who won last month's $560 million Powerball jackpot. And that's the way she wants to keep it.
How does the process work?
Under a Jane Doe alias, she has hired lawyers who went before a judge today, fighting to maintain her anonymity.
She doesn't want to be a celebrity.
The central problem, she already signed the winning ticket, as instructed on the back, a move she calls a huge mistake. After contacting attorneys, she learned the administrator of a designated trust could have signed, maintaining her privacy and possibly her safety.
There's documented history of people who are getting harmed, people who come into their homes. That's a real possibility.
Whiteout isn't an option, as the State Lotto Commission says any alteration would invalidate the ticket. The integrity of the game is at stake, they say, and the rules cannot be bent.
We don't feel that we can choose when we follow the law and when we don't.
Lottery officials acknowledge the life-changing aspect of Jane Doe's win and offered this advice.
It's like anybody who comes into sudden wealth, whether it be an entertainer, an athlete, or a lottery winner, she has to learn the ability to say no.
Jane Doe's attorneys in the State Lottery Commission are working on a plan that would allow her to claim her jackpot without revealing her identity until the court comes to a decision. It's unclear when the judge will rule, but in the meantime, her attorneys point out she is losing roughly $14,000 a day in interest. Shannon?
All right, Molly Line, thank you very much. We'll continue to track that case. So remember that grand immigration debate that was supposed to begin last night? Still nothing doing in the Senate. Next up, who's to blame for the whole thing coming to a grinding halt? And your daily dose of Omarosa drama. Republicans are laying down the law on DACA negotiations. The president tweeting this is the last chance to make a deal. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell allowing only this week to debate it on the Senate floor. Despite all the tough talk, Democrats tonight for the second time blocked Republicans from setting up initial votes on immigration reform. Where do we go from here? Let's talk about it with editor-in-chief of Campus Reform, Lawrence Jones, and radio talk show host and Fox News contributor Richard Fowler. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Well, good to be here, Shannon. Happy early Valentine's Day.
Happy early Valentine's Day to the two of you, too. Hopefully you have big plans. Okay, so we're letting you come tonight, so you will have tomorrow night free for all your festivities. Okay, so tonight, nothing doing in the Senate. Maybe they're celebrating Valentine's Day early, too, because this whole thing has stopped there. We understand the House tomorrow is going to start putting out some feelers on a vote, potentially, on the Goodlatte bill, which is much more conservative than what we've seen in the Senate. But McConnell says, as far as the Senate is concerned, this week is it. So, Lawrence, where do they go from here?
Well, I think this deal was dead on arrival, Shannon. I believe that the president set it up that he gave the Democrats what they wanted, which is, at the end of the day, they wanted citizenship. And not only did he give it for the DACA recipients, but he gave it to their parents, which angered a lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump. But he knew at the end of the day that the Democrats really didn't want a deal. And so I think what we have is this negotiator as a president giving the Democrats what they want and still requiring border security, knowing all along that they really didn't want a deal because they want to run on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, Richard, a lot of folks say that if they're not willing to settle up right now, is this about maintaining it so they can talk about it in the fall? You know, a lot of folks look back to 1986 and what Ronald Reagan did and what they passed then and said it was amnesty without ever getting the enforcement measures, and that Republicans would be crazy to agree to, hey, a path to citizenship for these 1.8 million. A lot of people on the right call that amnesty. And then we're not going to also insist on border security, cutting down on chain migration, redoing the visa lottery. The Democrats say they just want this clean on DACA and that's it, but they know they're not going to get that.
Well, I think the answer is somewhere in the middle, Shannon, on this one. I think you have to go out to the American people and have a conversation with them to see that. Just take a look at what happened today in Florida's 36th House District, where a legislative issue that was won by Trump by 5 points went for the Democrats by 8 points tonight because Republicans ran an anti-immigration message. So I think what the American people are trying to say here is this. Here is the big bargain. Democrats and a lot of Americans want the Dreamers to stay. Donald Trump wants this wall. It might be medieval, but he wants the wall. And there seems to be...
But the president went further than the Dreamers, Richard.
Wait a minute now. I think the deal is the Democrats give Trump the wall. He gives them the Dreamers. Game over deal. I think when you add in these other pieces like the lottery, when you add in family reunification,
you know they're not giving him the wall. I mean, Richard, they're not giving him the wall either. They're saying a study on border security or maybe, some kinds of, security measures.
I think if there was a clean bill that just had DACA and the wall, Democrats would support it. But Luis Gutierrez from Chicago, a staunch immigration advocate, said he would vote for it.
All right, let me ask Lawrence, do you think, do you think if it was just 2 million people in the deal, 2 million people plus the wall, would that end this? I mean, do you think that deal would get done without chain migration or visa lottery?
Well, I don't see it getting done without the visa chain migration and the visa lottery.
Well, what's the holdup?
I believe because here's the deal: if the president is going to extend it with the parents as well, and
but there's no parents in this deal in the House.
Yes, he is. The president has set up his guidelines.
Okay, hold on just a second. Let me just clarify so people understand. And in some of these proposals, it does say that chain migration will be allowed to go forward for some people. First of all, grandfathered in if you're pursuing it right now. Also, immediate spouse and children. And there are others who say this could also potentially extend to parents of DACA children.
But I think, like I said, I think a clean DACA bill for 1.8 Dreamers is exactly where I was at the beginning of this. And the wall.
So no
Democrats have indicated they'd be willing to vote for the wall. Right? You heard Luis Gutierrez, a staunch immigration advocate, said, I quote, I will give him his wall if we save the Dreamers. Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut said the same thing. So there seems to be some room in the middle, and I think the American people want a solution.
That would be an easy deal if that was the case.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get it.
I think it is an easy deal. I think the president's not making an easy deal.
I think the both of you are ready to go to the Senate because I think we've accomplished just about as much as they've accomplished there. But I want to make sure we get to our second topic, which is Omarosa. Here is her latest on the reality show she's now appearing on, Celebrity Big Brother.
As bad as y'all think Trump is, you would be worried about Pence. I'm just gonna say that.
I know. So everybody's
that's wishing for impeachment might want to reconsider their life.
Absolutely.
We would be begging for days of Trump back if Pence became president. That's all I'm saying. He's extreme. I'm Christian. I love Jesus. But he thinks Jesus tells him to say things that
Lawrence, she is a pastor's wife, and she is ripping Pence again on the faith thing. It's not, I mean, it's not unusual, but, you know, hey, here we go again.
She is ripping up Pence after she claims to be this pastor. She's essentially making fun of his faith, saying somehow that it's scary, but, you know, she believes in the prosperity gospel, so it doesn't shock me that this is coming from Omarosa. But not only that, she's ripping up the White House, but guess what? This is the White House's fault, Shannon. There are plenty black conservatives like me that warned the White House. We told them that she was a problem, that she shouldn't be over outreach, and they didn't listen because somehow she had a relationship with the president. We warned them. So guess what? You guys got to deal with damage control now. But we warned you guys, you were aware of it, and y'all still brought her to the White House to do absolutely nothing. She didn't help with the black community at all. So now they got to deal with this mess.
All right, Richard, quick final word to you.
I have no time for Omarosa. She lost her credibility for me when she was for Hillary, and then she went for Donald Trump. I think she's looking for a book deal, and given the information she's putting out in this show, she'll likely get it. Good luck to her. And here's the thing. She learned from the master of marketing, and now she's used it to weaponize against them. It's a sad and unfortunate truth. Moving on.
Okay, moving on, gentlemen. We'll leave it there with some agreement between the two of you, senators. Lawrence and Richard, great to have you both. See you soon.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, so many memos, so little time. With the Democrats' response to the Nunes memo in limbo, why our next guest is not buying into the FISA-gate furor over the Grassley-Graham memo. We'll sort that all out. And if you thought Best in Show was the pinnacle for aspiring pooches, think again. We're going to see if the world of politics really has gone to the dogs. A memo from Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley and Republican member Lindsey Graham has raised new questions about how the Intelligence Committee, the community, went about getting permission to launch and continue surveillance on a Trump associate, and sparked outrage among many conservatives. But my next guest has read the memo, as we have and shared with you, and also the House Intelligence GOP memo. He says he's still not outraged at the FBI. David French is staff writer for National Review, joins us live. David, great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, listen, you know, some people thought that this was explosive. Kim Strassel from the Wall Street Journal tweeted this last week. Why isn't the mostly unredacted Grassley memo front page news? Here's why. Because it confirms the Nunes memo and blows up the Schiff talking points, which the media ran with. Is that reading too much into this? I've read it. You've read it. I mean, there is interesting material there. So what do you make of it?
I think Kim's an outstanding reporter, has printed some great stuff. I disagree with this, and here's why. Both the Nunes memo and the Grassley memo don't contain sufficient evidence for us to conclude that the FBI was involved in this scandal here, to conclude whether the FISA court was materially misled. The evidence is just lacking. I'm not saying that it won't exist. I'm not saying that it will never exist, that it will never be discovered. But for right now, the evidence is lacking. And I think the best course of action is to say, I'm going to wait until I see more foundation, until I see more evidence of misconduct before I'm going to get outraged at the FBI.
There have been some suggestions that these FISA judges maybe didn't get the whole picture. And they've raised questions now about whether they are upset to hear some of the revelations that, if they watch the media and, read the papers, that they're hearing. Do you think at some point we could hear from one of these FISA judges, or even privately, that they could reach out and say, we need more information about what you provided to us that led us to giving you these warrants?
Well, you hit the nail on the head on something that's really, really important here. The FISA court has the ability to ask for more information. The rules of procedure under the FISA court prohibit the FBI, for example, or the DOJ from making material omissions in their submissions to the FISA court. If they violated the rules of procedure, the FISA court can act. Now, if it has acted, that's going to be secret right now. But that's one of the things the American people need to know. Has the FISA court acted? If the FISA court itself does not believe it's been materially misled, then that drains a lot of the air out of this scandal. If the judges themselves believe that the FBI was reasonably forthcoming and appropriately forthcoming, and remember, the standard when you're seeking a warrant is not to provide all of the information that's available. It's just you cannot make material omissions. And that's an important distinction, an important difference.
Okay, so let me ask you, which of these things do you think would be most helpful, and what do you think we will get? The Democrats' memo, the underlying FISA applications, the documents underlying the House intelligence memos? I mean, some of this has got to be, classified material that we can't get. But what do you think we can get, and what would be most helpful to get the full picture?
I think we'll get a mostly unredacted Democratic memo at some point. I don't think it'll be that helpful because I think it'll suffer from some of the same defects we've seen in the Grassley memo and the Nunes memo, is that they're going to be based on information we can't see and summaries of information we can't see. I'm going to be pessimistic, and I'm going to say it's going to be a long time before we see the actual FISA applications, before we see any orders from the actual FISA court. It may be a long time, years perhaps, but we have in this country an overclassification problem, and it's important for people to understand that a lot of things are classified that should not be.
Yeah, that's true. Well, all information would be helpful, especially the Democrats' memo. I think a lot of folks think it would give the fuller picture, so we will see. David French, great to have you on tonight. Thanks for joining us late.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, it is a dog-eat-dog world. Coming up, the tough reality one pooch has to face this campaign season. Look how cute. After the discovery that there's no age limit on candidates running for governor in Kansas, several teenagers decided to go for it. Well, hey, if they can do that, it prompted Taryn Woolley, the owner of Angus, this cute dog you see here, to file for his pooch, the paperwork he needed, the dog, to run for governor on an anti-squirrel agenda. That would definitely get my husband's vote. But alas, the Angus campaign was short-lived, as the Kansas Secretary of State said today. Angus cannot be the top dog because the state constitution actually declares the governor, even if it's a teenager, must be a human, must be a person. Well, Angus, we'd love to have you on to talk about it. You're always welcome on Fox News at Night. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington, and for Fox News at Night, I'm Shannon Bream.